The courtroom was already holding its breath when they called my name. Anna Cole. The ceiling fan creaked above us, slow and tired, like it had heard too many lies in this room to care anymore. Wooden benches were packed with people, journalists, lawyers, strangers who had come to witness a fall. Outside, Lagos traffic screamed as usual, impatient and unaware that a life was about to split in two inside courtroom. I stood up. Every movement felt louder than it should, my shoes against the tiled floor, the soft rustle of fabric, the small gasp someone made behind me. I didn't look back. I already knew what faces I would see: disappointment, expectation, judgment. She will protect him. Of course she will, after everything he did for her. I walked toward the witness stand, my legs steady even though my chest was not. My palms were cold, my mouth was dry. This wasn't fear of the court. It was fear of myself, fear that I might break before I said what I came to say. "Raise your right hand," the clerk said. I did. "Do you swear to tell the truth? The whole truth? And nothing but the truth?" "I do." The words sounded smaller than they should have, or maybe the room was just too big. I sat, and then, like it was inevitable, I felt it. His eyes. David sat in the dock, wearing a simple cream shirt that no longer looked like him. The man I knew always stood straight, shoulders back, calm even in chaos. Today he looked smaller, not weak, just human. Our eyes met. For a second, just 1 second, the courtroom disappeared. I saw him years ago standing in the rain, handing my mother an envelope when my father died. I saw him chasing away boys who thought a grieving girl was easy prey. I saw him smiling at me across cheap plastic tables, promising me safety with his silence. "I've got you, Anna." That was always his thing. Protection. Quiet, firm, convincing. His look now wasn't anger. It wasn't betrayal. It was a question. "You won't destroy me, will you?" The prosecutor stood. "Miss Cole," he said, adjusting his glasses, "you have known the defendant for how long?" 5 years, I replied. A murmur rippled through the room. "Would you describe your relationship with the defendant?" I swallowed. My throat tightened, but I forced the words out. "He was important to me." Important, that was the safest word I could find for love that had no safe ending. The prosecutor nodded slowly. "Miss Cole, on the night of March 18th, were you present at the office on Adiola Street?" "Yes." David shifted in his seat. I didn't look at him this time. "And did you witness the defendant sign the documents that led to the falsification of records now before this court?" My heart began to pound, loud, fast, like it was trying to escape before I finished the sentence. This was the moment everyone had come for. The room leaned forward. I could feel it, the weight of expectation pressing down on me. People believed they already knew my answer. After all, women like me didn't destroy men like David, not men who had saved them, not men they loved. My lawyer had asked me once, "Are you ready to be hated?" I hadn't answered him then. The judge looked at me over his glasses. "Miss Cole, answer the question." I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. My voice trembled, not because I was unsure, but because truth is heavy when you carry it alone. Maybe it would have been easier to lie, to protect him, to walk out of this building with his gratitude instead of my integrity. Before David became the man everyone whispered about in court, he was the man who showed up when my world collapsed. I was 16 the year my father died. Not the dramatic kind of death people prepare for. No long hospital stay, no goodbyes. Just one afternoon fever. One rush trip to the clinic. And then a doctor who couldn't meet our eyes. By evening, our house felt too big, too quiet, like it was already forgetting him. My mother cried the way people cry when they're trying not to be loud. My younger brother stopped talking. And I became older overnight. Bills came quickly. School fees came faster. That was when David walked into our compound. He wasn't family. Not really. Just a friend of a friend who used to greet my father at the junction. He came wearing a simple shirt, dust on his shoes, holding an envelope like he didn't want anyone to see it. "I heard," he said quietly. My mother nodded, eyes red. "I'm sorry." He handed her the envelope and didn't wait for thanks. Inside was money. Enough to clear my school fees. Enough to buy food without counting coins. "Don't worry," he said when my mother tried to speak. "It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. After that day, David became a regular presence. Not intrusive, not loud, just there. He fixed the leaking tap. Spoke to the landlord when rent was late. Walked my brother home when boys started bullying him. And when men began to look at me differently, the way they do when they sense vulnerability, David noticed before I did. One evening, a neighbour's son followed me too closely from the bus stop. I didn't say anything, but David saw my face when I entered the compound. "Did someone disturb you?" he asked. I shrugged. "It's nothing." He didn't argue. He just walked me home every evening after that. No lectures, no touching, no promises. Protection, quietly given. In a neighbourhood where men often helped with expectations attached, David was different. He never reminded us of what he'd done, never raised his voice, never crossed a line. People started saying things. "He's too involved. Why is he helping like that? That girl is lucky." I didn't feel lucky. I felt safe. And safety, I learned early, can feel like love when you've had too little of it. I noticed small things. How David listened more than he spoke, how he remembered my exam dates, how he never laughed when I said I wanted to become something important. "You will," he said once simply, like it was obvious. By the time I turned 18, I trusted him with parts of myself I hadn't named yet. My fears, my hopes, the quiet ache of growing up too fast. I didn't fall in love suddenly. It was slow, careful, almost responsible. Like I was afraid of ruining the only good thing that had come from my father's death. I didn't know then that the same hands that saved me would one day ask me to choose between gratitude and truth. By the time I finished secondary school, his presence in my life no longer needed explanation. My mother trusted him completely. Too completely. When David finally asked to make our relationship official, it didn't come with drama or grand gestures. He came one evening with oranges and malt, sat across from my mother and spoke calmly. "I care for Anna," he said. "I want to do things properly." My mother cried after he left. "Your father would have liked him," she said. That sentence sealed something in me. With David, I felt chosen. Not in the loud, romantic way movies sell love, but in a steady, grounding way. He didn't make promises he couldn't keep. He didn't demand my time. He didn't rush me. He gave me space. David felt like restoration. He encouraged my education, helped me get my first office job, and introduced me to people who spoke my name kindly even when I wasn't in the room. When things went wrong, he handled them quietly, efficiently. Too efficiently. Sometimes, I noticed things that didn't quite fit, but I ignored them because safety has a way of dulling curiosity. Phone calls he stepped outside to take, meetings he never explained fully, a file he once locked away quickly when I entered the room. "Work stress," he would say with a small smile, and I would nod. After all, he wasn't a careless man. He was careful, thoughtful, measured. That's what made him trustworthy. Once I asked him what he did exactly at work. He paused just a fraction too long before answering. "Things that need to be handled properly," he said. I laughed it off. You sound like a politician. He smiled, but his eyes didn't. Looking back, that was the moment I should have asked more questions. But love that feels like safety doesn't invite interrogation, it invites surrender. The night everything changed did not announce itself. There was no thunder, no sudden darkness, no instinct that told me to run. It was an ordinary evening, too ordinary to be dangerous. David had asked me to come over after work. He sounded tired on the phone, distracted in a way I hadn't heard before. I bought bread on the way, thinking about nothing more serious than dinner and rest. His apartment was unusually quiet when I arrived. No radio, no television. Just the low hum of the generator outside and voices, faint, controlled, coming from the bedroom. I stopped. I wasn't trying to listen, I swear I wasn't. But my name floated through the door, soft and unmistakable. She doesn't know, a man's voice said. David's voice answered, lower, firmer. She must not know. Something in my chest tightened. I stood still, my hand frozen on the doorframe, every instinct telling me this was not a conversation meant for me. Papers shuffled. Someone sighed. The records were altered, the other man said. If this goes public, I handled it, David cut in. I made sure it wouldn't trace back. There was a pause, heavy, final. And the man who died? The voice asked. My breath caught. David didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was calm. Too calm. That was negligence, he said. Not murder. But if the truth comes out, it won't matter. People don't care about details. They care about blood. The room tilted. I stepped back without thinking, my foot brushing against the table. The small sound was loud enough. The voices stopped. The door opened. David stood there, looking at me the way one looks at a fire already spreading, calculating, assessing damage. How long have you been standing there? He asked. Long enough, I said, my voice unfamiliar to my own ears. The other man avoided my eyes as he brushed past me and left. The door closed behind him with a quiet click that felt like a lock snapping shut. I looked at David, at the man who had paid my school fees, who had walked me home, who had become my definition of safety. What did you do? I asked. He didn't pretend not to understand. He sighed, ran a hand over his face, and sat down like someone exhausted by carrying something too long. I fixed a problem, he said. A man died, I whispered. He would have died anyway, David replied. The system failed him long before I touched anything. I shook my head. You changed records. You covered it up. Yes. Just like that, no denial, no panic, no apology. I stared at him, waiting for something. Fear, regret, shame. There was none. Why? I asked, my voice breaking now. David looked up at me then, really looked at me, and for the first time I saw something hard behind his eyes. Not cruelty, conviction. Because people like you don't survive the truth, he said quietly. Because if the powerful fall, the weak get crushed first. I took a step back. You lied, I said. I protected you, he corrected. I laughed once, a short, broken sound. By destroying someone else? By carrying the guilt so you wouldn't have to, his eyes seemed to say. He stood, closing the distance between us, his voice low and steady, the same voice that had calmed me so many times before. I did it so people like you could survive. The words hung between us, and in that moment, I understood something that changed everything. David didn't see himself as a criminal. He saw himself as a sacrifice, and he expected me to be grateful. Knowing the truth didn't come with clarity. It came with weight. After that night, sleep avoided me like it was afraid of what I might dream. I would lie awake beside my phone, staring at the ceiling, replaying David's words again and again. I did it so people like you could survive. They sounded noble in the dark, almost convincing. During the day, they sounded dangerous. David talked, a lot more than he ever had before, not because he was scared, but because he needed me to understand. He explained things carefully, like a teacher guiding a slow student. They needed someone to clean it up, he told me one evening. Someone who knew the system but wasn't greedy enough to expose it. And the man who died? I asked. David's jaw tightened. An accident caused by negligence. But accidents don't make headlines. Scandals do. He spoke as if he were describing weather, not a life erased. If this comes out, he continued, people will lose jobs. Families will scatter, innocent people will suffer, and the real culprits will walk free. I listened, nodding slowly, my stomach twisting. So you carry it alone? I asked. Yes, he said without hesitation. Someone has to. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to wrap his story around my conscience and call it sense. After all, hadn't he always carried things for us? Rent, fees, fear. But this was different. This was a lie that breathed. The police did not come with sirens. They came quietly, like people who already knew the ending. It was early morning when the knock came, firm, official, impossible to ignore. David was still buttoning his shirt when he opened the door. I stood behind him, my heart already racing, because some part of me had been waiting for this moment since the night I overheard that conversation. Mr. David Stone? One of the officers asked. Yes. You are under arrest. The words dropped into the room and stayed there. They read him his rights. They asked him to cooperate. Neighbours peeked from behind curtains. Someone whispered his name like it was a rumour that had grown legs. David turned to me, not panicked, not angry, just urgent. Anna, he said softly, as the handcuffs clicked shut. You know the truth. I nodded. You know why I did it. Another nod. Protect me, he said, not as a command, as a plea. The officer touched his arm, urging him forward. David leaned closer, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Remember everything I did for you, he said. Don't let it end like this. My chest tightened. I wanted to say something comforting, something loyal, something that sounded like love. But I couldn't lie anymore, not even gently. They took him away without resistance, no struggle, no shouting, just the quiet dignity of a man who believed he had done what was necessary. By noon, the story had spread. By evening, it had grown teeth. People stopped greeting me in the compound. Women whispered when I passed, "How could you let them take him? After everything he did for your family?" Even my brother asked the question I had been avoiding. Are you the one who reported him? He said. No, I replied, but I didn't deny knowing. That was enough. By the time the court date was set, I had lost more than a lover. I had lost a community. At night, I would sit alone and replay David's face when I said I promised nothing. I wondered if I was cruel. I wondered if I was ungrateful. I wondered if truth was worth this kind of loneliness. The night before court felt longer than it should have been. My mum had told me to be kind with my words. I should remember the times he was all we got around midnight. Ruth came over. She didn't knock. She never did. She walked in, dropped her bag, and sat on the floor like this was any other night. But her eyes were sharp, searching my face. You haven't eaten, she said. I'm not hungry. She nodded like she expected that answer. Then she asked the question I had been dodging all day. What are you going to do tomorrow? I don't know, I lied. Ruth studied me quietly. Then she leaned back against the bed. Anna, she said, you already know. You're just hoping someone will stop you. Tears burned my eyes. If I speak, I ruin him. If you don't, she replied, you ruin yourself. I looked away. She sighed, softer now. Listen. Whatever you say tomorrow will follow you for the rest of your life. People will forget the details, but they'll remember who you chose to be. She paused, then asked gently but firmly, who do you want to be after this? The question landed deep. Not what do you want to happen, not who do you love, who do you want to be? After Ruth left, I lay back and stared at the ceiling again. The house was quiet, but my thoughts were not. Silence wouldn't just protect David, it would protect the lie. It would protect the system. It would make me part of it. I lifted my chin. Yes, I said. A few people gasped. The prosecutor didn't pause. And did the defendant know the records were false at the time he signed them? This was it. The final step. The point of no return. I looked at David again. He wasn't shaking his head. He wasn't begging. He was just watching me. Waiting. My voice shook, but it didn't break. Yes, my lord, I said clearly this time. He did it. The silence that followed was not ordinary silence. It was the kind that ends things, I answered simply. I overheard a conversation. Yes. He admitted his involvement. Yes. Did he deny responsibility? No. My voice didn't shake. I didn't raise it either. I wasn't there to perform. I was there to tell the truth. I didn't add extra details to make myself sound brave. I didn't leave things out to make him look better. I said exactly what happened, no more, no less. That was what made it devastating. The defense tried to rattle me, suggesting confusion, emotion, love clouding my judgment. I listened. Then I replied calmly, I loved him, I said. That's why I listened carefully. A murmur moved through the benches. I felt David's eyes on me then, not burning, not furious, just heavy. When I finally looked at him, our eyes met. He wasn't angry. He was broken. There was no accusation in his stare, no betrayal, just a quiet understanding, like he had known all along how this would end, like he had been waiting for it. And somehow that hurt more than anger ever could. When my testimony ended, I stepped down slowly. My legs felt light, like they might give way at any moment, but they didn't. I returned to my seat and sat upright, hands still folded. The court adjourned for a recess. People whispered, heads turned. Some looked at me with pity, others with judgment, a few with something close to respect. I felt none of it clearly. As David was led away, he glanced back once more. Our eyes met again. No words passed between us. None were needed. The truth had already spoken. The verdict didn't come with thunder. No dramatic gasp, no shouting, just words read aloud in a steady voice, each one landing like a final nail. Guilty. David stood there as the sentence was delivered. I didn't look at him. Not then. I already knew what I would see. Resignation, not rage. Acceptance, not denial. The face of someone who had made his choices long before the court even noticed. When the courtroom emptied, I stepped outside. The air was sharper than I remembered, colder. It felt like the world had decided to punish me, too. People didn't rush toward me. They stepped away. Whispers followed me like shadows. She could have stayed quiet. She ruined him. How could she do that to her own? By evening, the labels had settled on me. Traitor, ungrateful, heartless. Friends stopped calling. Some blocked me quietly without explanation. Others sent long messages full of judgment disguised as concern. A few were braver, or crueler, and said it outright. If you loved him, you would have protected him. I read every word. I didn't reply to any of them. I walked through the empty streets, people stepping aside, judging, whispering. Every step was heavy, but I breathed. My mother felt I was too harsh. I had lost almost everything, but I had kept myself. It arrived on a quiet afternoon, tucked among bills and routine letters, a thick envelope with my name handwritten in familiar loops. I didn't recognize the handwriting at first. My hands shook as I tore it open. Inside, the paper smelled faintly of something sterile, like the prison it had come from. I unfolded it carefully, bracing myself, though I didn't know for what. The letter was from David. I froze the moment I saw his words. Anna, it began. If you are reading this, the trial is long over. I have nothing to ask from you, nothing to demand. Only the truth I never could speak when we stood together in that courtroom. He went on to explain piece by piece what I had never known. The man who had been accused and nearly destroyed because of his negligence, innocent. He had been set up, a pawn in a game far larger than anyone could have imagined. My testimony, he said, had uncovered the chain of events, forced investigators to look closer, and prevented someone else, someone completely innocent, from being punished for crimes they didn't commit. He wrote about the victims I hadn't even known existed, future lives that would have been ruined, tragedies avoided because I had chosen to speak. He didn't paint himself as a hero, but as someone who had been saved from deeper corruption, by my honesty, by my refusal to remain silent. I blinked, overwhelmed. Months of guilt, months of whispers, months of isolation. They pressed against me in that moment, and then, slowly a strange warmth seeped through. He thanked me. That was all. Not for saving him, not for making things easier, not for sparing himself, though I now knew I had. He simply thanked me. You were my conscience when I could not be mine, he wrote. You stood for truth when it mattered most. Not everyone would have done what you did, Anna. But you did. I held the letter to my chest, letting tears fall freely. Not tears of regret, not tears of fear, but relief, recognition, something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years, that the choice I had feared would destroy everything had, in fact, saved many lives, including his, in ways I couldn't have imagined. And for the first time, I allowed myself to hear it clearly. Gratitude. Not blame. David was free in spirit, even behind bars, and I felt a little freer too. For the first time in months, the silence inside me wasn't heavy. It was soft, and for once, it was filled with truth. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Do you think I did the right thing? Should I have lied to protect him? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.